Hello everyone, I'm Kathi Powers, the Superintendent with the Twinsburg City School District. Welcome to Twinsburg Schools Today. Well, can you believe it's November? This school year seems to be going by so fast, and we have so many things to celebrate, such wonderful students and staff members. And speaking of that, I'm just delighted today to introduce to everyone to Tajuana Hunnicutt, our Director of Pupil Services.
Hello, how are you?
Good, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now I know last year we didn't have a chance to chat about what you do for the school district. Now I know our community is curious about what does a Director of Pupil Services do?
Yes.
But before we get to that, why don't you just talk a little bit about yourself personally?
Okay.
What makes you tick? Why you're interested in leading the charge here in our school district with regard to everything having to do with pupil services?
Okay. Thank you for having me on your show today. As a person, I'm a mom, first and foremost. I have an 8-year-old freshman at Kent State University, and I have an 8-year-old that is a 3rd grader, so I'm very excited about that. I'm a wife. My husband is Benjamin Hunnicutt. And what makes me tick and why do I do pupil services? I love all things about students, and quite honestly about students with disabilities. It's very personal to me. My sister was identified as a student with a disability as a preschooler, and she is a young adult now, so it is very personal to me.
Well, and I do have to say, when I see you with our staff or when we participate in let's say parent conferences, you are very personable to our families and to our staff members, and you take everything so personally. Yes. With regard to ensuring that you're listening and that you're going to really problem solve with folks so that ultimately our students are serviced in the best manners possible.
Yes. You know, when you sit on both sides of it and you can put yourself as a family member, it becomes very personal. And I just remember watching my mom navigate through this system as a parent of a child with a disability, and learning what it was like for the first time, and with me watching her, and you don't know the acronyms and you don't understand all of the lingo that a lot of times is kind of thrown at you as a family. And so it's very intentional for me to make sure that families are educated about the process, and that they understand that they have an advocate with them to really want to do what is best for our students. So that's why it's so personal to me.
Yeah, well, and I know that our parents appreciate that.
Thank you.
You know, sometimes a parent may be watching their child struggle in school, and maybe this is the second child, and they compare one child against the next, and they're worried about where their child is developmentally.
Yes.
So if we can start from the beginning of a process, how does a parent connect with the school, and what kinds of things can a parent expect for the Twinsburg City School District to do to partner with families to ultimately get the student to the services he or she might need?
Absolutely. So if we're talking about a parent of a small child, so a preschool age child, the process could begin through the pediatrician's office. The process could begin through the Help Me Grow process for early interventions. Mm-hmm. And then through there, they connect and notify the school district that there is a small child, a 2-year-old, or possibly a rising 3-year-old that lives within our community. That potentially has been identified as having maybe some developmental disabilities or some concerns that the family has raised. Sometimes it is the family saying, you know, maybe there's something with speech and language that appears to be delayed. Maybe I have some concerns. And we'll receive those calls, whether it's from a preschool in the community, a daycare in the community, or even just a family calling to find out what is the next thing that I need to do. And so from there, we would go through an identification process to figure out if the district does in fact suspect a disability, and would then go through an evaluation process.
What does that look like for a child?
It could be a little bit intimidating, quite honestly, because a lot of times this is their first time coming through the doors. Mm-hmm. And going through some tests. But one of the things that I can say, especially about our team over at Wilcox Primary School, is that everything is play-based, and so we try to assess our children in an environment where they are the most comfortable. so that we can watch them in their natural element, communicate, use language, manipulate items and toys, lots of observations. There is some interaction when we're talking about evaluating them with the speech and language therapist, sometimes the occupational therapist if there are some mobility concerns, fine motor or gross motor, and manipulating items and things like that. Sometimes a physical therapist may be involved in that process, again, if there are some gross motor concerns that a family may have. But a lot of it is play-based. A lot of it is observation, and then obviously one of the most important parts is the information from our families. Mm-hmm. So lots of questions to our parents, developmental questions, to truly get an understanding of what the child is like in their environment outside of that school-based environment so that we can compare all things. The key is the parents and a lot of their input and the concerns that they have, but more importantly, the strengths of the children as well.
So a parent works along with the school district, participates in some of the conversation related to the developmental, sometimes it's delays of their child.
Correct.
And then if a child is identified as a preschool young student,
yes,
what happens next?
Well, that's when families get to make some decisions. They can decide to take that evaluation and just kind of sit on it for a little while. They could also decide to enroll the student in our Wilcox primary IPP program or our integrated preschool program. That is an integrated program where we have both typical peers as well as children with disabilities in an inclusive environment. It's a half-day program in the morning and we have a PM program in the afternoon. We really try to pair the students up with typical peers so that they can have some role models and model a lot of the expected developmental behaviors and communication skills and academic skills that we're wanting them to learn at that age. Sometimes families decide to take the evaluation, but then keep the child at home or maybe a private daycare or a private preschool program. So they really do have some options at that point, but the most important part is that they are armed with the information and they're armed with an evaluation report that not only talks about their child holistically and maybe some of the deficits that they have, but more importantly, there is a lot of information about recommendations of next steps to help grow the child.
And I'm so proud of our preschool and
Absolutely.
Our preschool staff. They, have done such a wonderful job, and often through the years that I've been here, I hear parents reflect on the experience that their preschoolers have had with us.
Yes.
And how really that program gets children on the right path to learning.
It's one of my favorite buildings. Yeah. I won't tell anybody that,
right.
But when I need to pick me up, I'll go over to Wilcox and hang out in a preschool classroom, might get a little dance in with some of the little ones. It's one of the favorite places in the district.
Just fun.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So we have, the introduction of services for our youngest students.
Yes.
But we may have children who, along the path of learning, have some delays or some areas of concern. So entering a child into special education services doesn't have to happen when you're 3 or 4 or 5.
Correct.
So in the case where we have an older child, and maybe it's a reading delay,
yes.
Is that process replicated with the older students as well?
So that process is a little bit different because, so let's just say that it is a 4th grade student and a family has been having some concerns just about if their child is reading on grade level or maybe how quickly they are picking up the information. So the process is a little bit different because with that we start to look at historical data. So we're looking at academic performance all the way back to kindergarten to really analyze the performance data of the student. We are taking obviously input in from the family, but we're also taking an input from the teachers. We're looking at if the student has been a part of any reading intervention. any additional services maybe provided through title reading, pull-out services for reading, so that we can really analyze the data. And if a family does have concerns and brings to our attention, or if we have concerns and brings to the family's attention, we could definitely go through the same suspicion of a disability process, and with permission from the family, as a team, make some decisions about what areas in particular we're going to look at, and what partners are going to do assessments, whether it's definitely a school psychologist, but again, it might be a speech concern, maybe some articulation or receptive language concerns, and so speech language may be a part of that. And comprehensive assessment is done, along with input, again, from families and from all of the teachers, and then together we make a decision as to whether the student meets the criteria as a student with a disability, and what areas of focus they should focus on.
So once a student is identified
Yes.
for special education services, an individual education plan
Yes.
is developed.
Yes.
And it could be complex and sometimes not so much. So can you just say a few things about an IEP?
Yes, definitely. So it is driven from the ETR. So after that evaluation team report is completed, we have 30 days to take the information and the recommendations from that report and develop very targeted goals and objectives for the student to work on. Sometimes it can be complex, and in that sense, you like to prioritize and say, okay, what are the top areas we should focus on first? Let's have the student help to make some growth in those particular areas, and then we'll target, sort of take the next steps after that. It is typically written to cover a year's worth of time, and it is written from a strengths-based perspective, in that there are goals that we want the student to be able to master over the course of a year. Obviously composed with specially designed instruction, or really those targeted science-based evidence-based strategies that the intervention specialist is going to use to help grow the student and to help them focus on and make progress within those goals and objectives.
So if I had a child and they're identified for special education services,
Yes.
it would seem then every year I would be meeting with the team, the IEP team, to review the success my child has had over a year's time,
Yes.
or where the challenges continue.
Yes, yes. So at minimum, it would be every year.
Mm-hmm.
It is a fluid document. So, you know, the beautiful thing about that is that any member of the team could say, hey, you know what, let's get back together. Let's tweak this area. Maybe we should add something here, or maybe the student is making wonderful growth in this particular goal and objective. Maybe it's time for us to change it and increase it just a little bit. You know, the nice thing about it is that any member of that team can ask the team to reconvene at any moment throughout that course of that year. And the other thing is that we have to report progress. And so every 9 weeks, when report cards go out for all students, we are also legally required to report progress on the IEP and report how the student is doing on those particular goals and objectives.
So there's a lot of conversation back and forth, whether it's verbal or
Yes.
paper, however it is.
Yes.
We're making sure that our staff is in communication with our families.
Definitely, definitely.
So if my child is identified as a special education student, a student with disabilities, does that mean my child's in special education programs for the duration of their time in our schools?
Not necessarily. You know, I like to look at this as a toolbox. I like to look at an IEP as a toolbox, and I like to look at the goals and objectives that are within the content of that document as the tools that the student needs. And so once we have this toolbox filled with all of the tools that they need, we definitely have students that work through their plan and they no longer meet the criteria as a student with a disability. Yes.
That's wonderful.
Yes, it's exciting.
So, so some of our students are students with disabilities, and they are protected under the federal law,
Yes.
IDEA.
Yes.
And some of our students have something called a 504 plan.
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit about the difference between the two?
Yes, so a Section 504 plan is protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and it is actually not just for K-12 students. Adults can be serviced on the Section 504 plan.
That's interesting.
Young people in college can be supported. It is an accommodation plan. It is what I like to call something that levels the playing field for individuals, whether you have asthma or whether you have some other type of medical conditions such as ADHD. Sometimes we've had students that may have diabetes, and it's very it could really impact how frequently they miss school or medical needs that they need while they are in school. Any type of medical condition could potentially allow a student to be eligible for a Section 504 plan. Sometimes children have like a medical condition such as asthma, but it may be controlled, and so a Section 504 plan may not be necessary for them. It doesn't mean that they're not eligible. It just simply means that they don't need it.
So let's give an example. There's a student who's an athlete.
Yes.
And they suffer a concussion while playing football.
Yes.
And it's beginning to impact their schoolwork. What do I do as a parent?
Call us right away. Definitely, and that's actually a really good example, because sometimes it can be something that was non-existent before. An accident or an incident happens, and now we have some things going on with the student, and it's impacting them. Notifying either through the office or through an administrator or even through the nursing office and the clinic. When we have that information, our team that is led by our guidance counselors, preschool through 12th grade, will convene a team with the general education teachers as well as the parent and the student, if the student is able to participate. And we look at the factors, such as this example of a student that has suffered a concussion. We look at the medical recommendation and the information from the doctors as far as what type of accommodations that they need. For a student with a concussion, sometimes it's limited access to light. Sometimes it is shortened amount of information and the strain on their eyes. Sometimes it's no access to screens, and with us working with Chromebooks. And so with that, we will put together an accommodation plan and make some adjustments within that service plan for the students. That is given to all of their teachers, and the teachers follow it and help to support the students.
So again, that communication between the families and our staff is really, really important.
Yes.
Trying to get on the front end of it before it becomes more problematic for the student.
Yes, definitely.
Goodness, that's a lot to know.
It is a lot to know.
So in the Department of Pupil Services, we've talked about students with disabilities and students with 504 plans, but your department covers even more than that.
Yes, it does.
So, which includes now gifted, our gifted population. So if a student is identified as gifted, what does that mean?
Well, that means that they have superior cognitive abilities. They are functioning higher than the average student, whether it is in a reading, whether it is in math, it could be in creative arts, for example. And so with that, we push our students, we stretch our students, we increase and enhance the academic resources that they have and the courses that they are receiving. Sometimes they're considered to be twice exceptional. Sometimes they may be a student with a disability in another category, and they're also gifted in their academic abilities.
That's great.
Yes.
So it's really about understanding where our children are in the continuum of learning and development.
Definitely.
And finding the right programs for them. And I know our gifted kids have something called a WEP.
Yes, they do.
What does that mean?
That is a written education plan, and so it is similar in the sense of an individual education plan, but with this we are targeting what the student's strengths are and what we are working on to stretch them and grow them when we look at that continuum.
So it's not more of the same.
No.
And I think that's one thing that we'd like to encourage our families to understand is when children are gifted, it doesn't mean that we pile on the same amount of schoolwork.
That is correct.
Or double the schoolwork as another general ed child.
That is correct. We really challenge them to think in a larger sense, and really challenge and ask them to expound on their thoughts and to be creative in their thoughts. And it's not everyone else has 20 math problems and we give you 25.
Right.
It's not that. It is maybe they are functioning at 2 grade levels higher than the current grade level that they are in. So it is even providing with a different curriculum than some of the other students may be receiving.
And giving the student that stretch.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Wow. And then, of course, then we talk about students who are English language learners. I'm always amazed at the number of languages spoken in our school district.
Yes. I believe at last count it was over 30 different languages
Yes.
that are represented across our school district, definitely. Yes.
And so we have a teacher, an educator who works along with our ELL students.
Yes.
And what does that look like for students?
So so one of the things that we do is when families enroll in our school district and they complete the language survey, they will indicate whether there is another language besides English that is spoken in the home. And so from there, we will do what's called the OELPS, and that is the Ohio English Language Proficiency Exam.
More alphabet soup.
More alphabet soup. And that is the baseline assessment that is done to figure out where the students are in being able to understand the English language. And depending on their performance, they may exit at that point because they meet the criteria as a student that has enough foundational skills within the English language to not need those additional services. If they do not, then with permission from the families, they participate in our English language program with our teacher, Ms. Rosales, and she supports students both, really across the school district from kindergarten through 12th grade, meets with them weekly to provide them, based on where their assessments indicate that they need support with accessing the English language. She works with them in that. And then all of the students participate in the OELPA, which is the Ohio English Language Proficiency Exam that is given in the spring. And with that, they have to perform at levels of proficiency that allows them to exit from needing to participate in that assessment.
You know, all that you've shared today really highlights the fact that we have so many children, and really it's important to know their stories because, you know, we have students with disabilities and we have students with 504 plans, we have English language learners, we have gifted children and general education children too.
Yes.
And so it's really all about identifying where your child is on the continuum, and then the school partners with you to build a plan of education for each child.
Yes.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's fun time.
Busy department. And then, of course, you are also our foster care liaison and our homeless liaison.
Yes.
So families who are coming from those situations would contact you for assistance.
For any assistance, I'm partnering with the Department of Children and Family Services, whether it's Summit County or Cuyahoga County or any surrounding counties, to help support our families that may have taken in a child that has been placed in their home that is identified as being foster, or a child that is originally from our school district that is being supported someplace else. So lots of partnerships with other school districts around the state of Ohio in that sense. And with our families that are homeless or living in transition, our goal is to break down whatever barriers that we need to do to ensure that the children continue to attend Twinsburg City Schools, and through wraparound services and our partnership with Beachbrook and other community entities, we helped the families to secure whatever services that they need outside of, the school district to stabilize their living situation, because we know that when children have a stable home environment, they are more successful in school. And if we can break down any barriers so that the consistency of continuing to come to school with teachers and students and peers that they are familiar with, that's one less thing that the children have to stress about and worry about while the families are dealing with some transitional situations that they may be experiencing.
Right, because trauma with students really is so impactful.
It is,
right.
It is. And, there's a lot to be said about having a familiar face that you come to every single day, and having a warm environment to come to every day, and warm meals and all of those things, and your friends. And sometimes our families experience a lot of challenges, and COVID has been difficult for some of our families. So if we can keep this part of their experience as consistent as possible, that's major.
Well, I think our district is very fortunate, Mrs. Hunnicutt, that you are at the helm of our Pupil Services Department. If I'm a parent at home and I'm listening to all of this information and I have questions or concerns, where do I go? How do I connect with you?
Yeah, so you can call me 330-486-2091. Email, because I'm usually never at my desk. And it's thehunnicutt@twinsburgcsd.org. And I'm also on our new district website under the Pupil Services tab.
Right, and
Yes.
and of course, all the things that you do are on the website, or
Yes.
you're so easy to access.
Definitely.
Well, thank you so much for so many ways that you impact our families, our students, and the help that you give our staff members to ensure that they have the skills that they need to do right by our students.
Thank you, and I appreciate being a part of the Tiger family. It's been it's been great.
And we're glad that you're here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, that concludes our show for November. We're heading right into the holiday season. So many activities, so many things to participate in. We invite you to take a look at our district website for the latest calendar. Of course, you can find us on social media on my Twitter account at TwinsburgSup, S-U-P-T. Just so delighted that you're tuning into our show. We look forward to seeing you very soon at one of our many events in the Twinsburg City School District. Have a great day, everybody.